already put in our hand sanitizing stations. We had changed our housekeeping protocols. We had already
of flexible work arrangements. And I will be your host for today. And my name is Tamara Nelson. I'm the Chief Technical Director at the Jamaica Productivity Center. And we are the National Productivity Organization in Jamaica. We are tripartite. We have the Confederation as partners of trade unions, the Employers Federation, as well as the GOJ. And our mission is to assist the nation to be more productive, more innovative, and competitive through productivity initiatives, consultancy, advocacy, research and knowledge, and technical assistance. And today we'll be sharing some of these insights that we have with you, some of the lessons learned. We have experts here that are ready to unpack some of their knowledge with you so that you can have a better understanding of how to move forward and how to navigate. Because at the end of all of this, we want to strive, not just survive. We want to come out on top of our game and to look for the opportunities that exist even within a pandemic situation. So with us, I'll just quickly introduce my panel to you. We have representing the Ministry of Labor and Social Security, CTD Jennings, Ms. Diane Jennings. We also have with us Ms. Gillian Carrodus, who is the Divisional Director of Industrial Relations and Allied Services at the Ministry of Labor and Social Security. Mrs. Helene Davis White, the President of the Jamaica Confederation of Trade Unions. Ms. Kadia Morris, Human Resource Relations Manager at Sagicor Bank Jamaica Limited. Mr. Rory Ebanks, Director of Information and Security Advisor Services at Simtai Corporation. And we also have our very own Brittany Johnson, a research officer here at Jamaica Productivity Center, who will be sharing some of our own insights with you this morning. So we have a very, very capable panel, and we hope that you'll stay with us and chat with us. We have some of your questions already banked, and we hope that at the end of it, you'll be in a better position and more fully aware of how you can move forward as it relates to flexible work arrangements and its impact on productivity. So at this time, we will now move right along into the next part of our session. And this will be the bringing of greetings from the Ministry of Labor and Social Security. Unfortunately, the Minister, Honorable Lester Michael Henry, could not be with us today, and Ms. Jennings will be assisting with that. So over to you, Ms. Jennings.
Good morning, everyone. We do apologize.
You're on mute. Not hearing you.
Good morning, everyone. Are you hearing me?
I am hearing.
Are you hearing me, Tamara? You're hearing me? Okay. So I would like to offer the apologies of the Minister, Honorable Mike Henry, and so I will bring his greetings. Madam Chairperson, Chief Technical Director of the Jamaica Productivity Center, panelists, ladies and gentlemen who are joining us via our YouTube channel, I greet you well. Mindful of the time limit on this presentation, permit me to say how honored I am to be sharing in this virtual forum, the second in a series of four being hosted by the Jamaica Productivity Center. If there is ever a time to increase our productive sector and find innovative ways to be efficient and effective, it is now. The COVID-19 pandemic has taken a significant toll on economies globally. The World Bank predicts that global GDP will contract by as much as 5.2%. Locally, this is a major concern to organizations, both within the private and public sectors, particularly as it relates to how employers operate, employees work, and citizens do business. Conversely, as a country, how well we effectively and efficiently utilize our resources during this time will be of critical importance. So when we talk about productivity, efficiency and effectiveness are distinctly inseparable components. It is simply a measure of the output you get from an input. Therefore, as we seek to become innovative and find ways to improve the way we do business, even as we live with the COVID-19 virus, it is indeed a testimony of the measure of ingenuity and never say die spirit of resilience. The new work order is now needed more than ever. The ILO, International Labour Organization, defines flexible work as an arrangement offering various possibilities in relation to the number of hours worked and the arrangement of rosters, shifts, or work schedules on a daily, weekly, monthly, or yearly basis. Additionally, flexible work arrangements were a fundamental part of the Jamaica labour market reform process, which started in 1994. It was developed to recommend strategies which would assist our country to be more competitive in the international market. The Employment Flexi Work Arrangements Miscellaneous Provisions Act of 2014, passed in November 2014, paved the way for the formal implementation of flexible work arrangements. To this end, I use the platform to encourage organizations to adopt and to use the flexible work arrangements, which will lead to a safe and healthy and productive execution of our jobs, especially at this time. Being in an era where technology is advanced, there are several options to be considered when implementing flexible work arrangements. In fact, the International Workplace Group shows that 80% of workers in the United States would choose a job which offered flexible working hours. In our local context, the Ministry of Labor and Social Security is developing a telecommuting policy, currently in its draft stage, which will formalize the arrangements that would provide the worker with the opportunity to work from a site other than the central work site. In some instances, the worker could perform some or all of the work from his or her home. The Jamaica Productivity Center is currently executing a COVID-19 productivity impact survey. The survey targets businesses and organizations operating in Jamaica. The preliminary results indicate that there is a 40% reduction of hours worked in the office, 20% of employees are completely working from home, 7% of companies implemented a flexible work site, and 33% introduced staggered shifts. These results indicate the responsiveness of organizations to this pandemic, and this will assist in taming the economic fallout within our country. The implementation of the flexible work arrangements will facilitate and enable employers and employees to negotiate and select the hours, days, and time which are best suited to the organizational goals. Due to the uncertainty associated with the COVID-19 pandemic, organizations continue to show their agility through the adoption of the implementation of flexi work arrangements. Through the efforts of the ministry, and by extension, the Jamaica Productivity Center, we are committed to providing necessary support in ensuring that employees and employers are adequately equipped in understanding the positive impact of flexi work arrangements. Some of the benefits of adopting flexi work arrangements include increased employment opportunities, increased productivity, and reduced labor costs. And it also may help to improve health and well-being, and as a result, reduce absenteeism and enhance employee engagement, morale, and motivation. Although there are several careful considerations that should be made prior to implementation of the FLEXI work arrangements, organizations and their employees are positioned to reap significant benefits. Ladies and gentlemen, I look forward to the insightful presentations as we combine our shared experiences and collective wisdom to arrive at a paradigm shift as we chart a new course of development and prosperity. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Jennings, for that, opening and greetings from the Ministry of Labor and Social Security. Very insightful. Thank you for sharing that with us and for your contribution. And, some of the points you mentioned, a safe, healthy, productive execution of work is paramount at this time. And you also mentioned agility. And, that is also something as organizations and individuals we need to really embrace. So we thank you very much and hope you will continue the work at the ministry in helping all of us to be as flexible and agile as possible. Okay, so that, ladies and gentlemen, was a little taste or overview of, what is to come. And just to give you an idea of some of the topics that we'll be unpacking this morning would include looking at a little bit deeper the legislative framework or the labor laws associated with flexible work arrangements, the whole matter of technology and infrastructure, cybersecurity. That's also an issue for many based on our interactions with our stakeholders. Measurement and verification, how do you know that you are still being productive? How do you know your workers are still having a positive output? That's also something that a lot of persons have been querying, coming to us at the JPC, how do we do this? So we have somebody here that has done it, and they will be able to share some of their lessons learned with you. The whole matter of the workers' perspective. How are they feeling? What challenges are they facing? What are some of the workarounds? What has worked in our local context will also be discussed. And also some innovations that have been happening in the space as it relates to flexible work arrangements. So please stay tuned with us as we go through some of these issues. And again, if you have questions, we have persons monitoring the various platforms, and we will try to take as many as possible as we go through this session this morning. So we have next up Ms. Jillian Carruthers, who is also from the Ministry of Labor and Social Security, and she is the Divisional Director of Industrial Services, Industrial Relations and Allied Services. And Jillian is no stranger to productivity either. And she has over 20 years of experience in the field of industrial relations. And she has prepared some information for you and will unpack the whole matter of flexible work arrangements in terms of the different types and go through some of the questions that I know you have in mind. So Jillian, at this time, we welcome you.
Thank you very much, Moderator Tamar Nelson and Acting Permanent Secretary. Good day to my colleague panelists and our online participants. I take the opportunity to again commend the Jamaica Productivity Center for opening this online conversation on productivity. And flexi work is excellent for family life. It's excellent for persons with disabilities and persons with comorbidities. So why haven't we been doing this all our lives? I'm enjoying it. I'm actually in travel-related quarantine and I'm working remotely. This is flexi work. So today, as we focus on work and flexi work, it's almost impossible to divorce ourselves from the wider family life and health implications that impact the choice to participate in flexi work arrangements. So simply put, workers may choose to engage in flexi work as the most logical option for millennials. They don't want to go into an office space necessarily. Others with greater problems commuting, they may want to also opt for flexi work arrangements for work-study balance, work-life balance, and especially those that are caring for children and elderly family members. They also would like to participate in this. So we're going to be looking at a quick presentation, and I will share screen at the moment. Can someone confirm that they're seeing my screen?
I am not seeing it as yet, Jillian.
Okay, just a quick second.
There we go.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so we are going to be looking at a couple of things. One, a study that the Ministry of Labor did as far back as 10 years ago. And why are we looking 10 years ago? Because we just want to see what the conversation was 10 years ago versus what we're talking about now. We'll be looking at the legislative framework in Jamaica as created by the Employment Flexible Work Arrangements Act that was in 2014. We're going to be also spending some time to discuss briefly the challenges presented by COVID-19 and the use of flexi work arrangements, and also just briefly the changing world of work and looking at 2020 and beyond. So the objective of that study that was done by our Planning, Research and Monitoring Unit in September 2020 was really to look whether flexible work arrangements were feasible in organizations, whether they resulted in reduced expenditure, and whether they resulted in the reduction in redundancy exercises. And the definition of flexi work, I heard Permanent Secretary just mention it, and it really used the ILO definition that arrangements, flexi work really speak about arrangements offering various possibilities in relation to the number of hours worked and arrangements for rosters, shifts, and other work schedules on a daily, weekly, monthly, or yearly basis. So this study even expanded that definition to look at the choice of hours that people want to work, the days that they worked, and also the place of work. The two major types of flexi arrangements that was discovered was that people were using flexi time, that was a shift system, or compressed work weeks. But there are other types of flexi arrangements that were uncovered or unveiled by this study: job sharing, telecommuting, reduced hours through part-time work, banking of hours, staggering or dispersed hours, career breaks, where persons wanted a few weeks off, you know, what we call no-pay leave. So the benefits of flexi work arrangements, as discovered by this study, were for the workers as distinct from employers. And the workers pretty much said that they were experiencing more job satisfaction, motivation, and energy. And people need energy in the workplace. Their creativity was boosted and their ability to handle stress better. And it's work-related stress as well as stress relating to their home arrangements. Employers related that the benefits included the ability to meet the needs of the workload fluctuations, adequate time to screen and select permanent employees, and reduce costs of employees benefits because they weren't paying some of the normal uniform allowance and all of those overheads and so. They also, employers spoke about lessening of absenteeism, improvements in teamwork, employee loyalty, motivation, and so. But there are disadvantages discovered in this survey, in this study, and the workers, some of them felt isolated or alienated through telecommuting. They thought that sometimes they were overlooked for promotions because they were not physically in the workplace. And there was a reduction in some of their income because they were not doing certain jobs that probably travel-related payments were not forthcoming. Employers thought that the disadvantages included difficulty in supervising their staff, challenges in coordinating meetings and group training, incompatibility of some workers who were doing this job sharing. Some were saying, oh, I did more than the other one, and it was just not working, as well as the OSH-related overwork and exhaustion as well. So the survey findings, the 3 questions that were asked were answered in part, that yes, flexible work arrangements are feasible. And 2, in terms of the expenditure, there was a difficulty in determining the actual results. When I say actual results, because organizations fail to set targets and monitor efficiency and the productivity outcomes, the results, the tangible results were not being properly recorded. And this is something that we need to improve upon. And we can extrapolate, therefore, that the productivity gains are there from flexible work arrangements. In terms of whether it led to reductions in the positions that are being made redundant, it is still unclear because there was, again, poor data gathering by organizations. So as we move forward, data gathering is essential. So recommendations out of this study is that adequate work and employer consultation is necessary prior to implementation. Workers need to be assured of the short-term sacrifices and long-term gains, especially where income reduction is a part of the conversation. And government needs to lead the public education so that persons understand flexi work and how to implement it. And this is a good forum that we are using as government to do that. And the parties, it's recommended, should set goals that can be verified, the productivity levels, the job satisfaction levels that can be verified to see the effectiveness of the exercise. So that, in a nutshell, was the result of that study 10 years ago, and it's very applicable today. And it was very applicable at the time that we premeditated an Employment Flexible Work Arrangements Act. And what this act really did was to allow persons more flexibility. It changed the standard time that persons worked. For instance, where you work maximum 8 hours per day at single time rates, now you can work 12 hours per day at single time rates. The Flexi Work Act as well spoke about a standard work week as 40 hours per week instead of what some other legislation said, which is 48 hours under the Apprenticeship Act. So change it to 40 hours for every single legislation that speaks about work. It also modified our understanding of rest day. And a rest day can be any day in any 7 days. So Sunday was seen as a rest day under some legislation. It is no longer seen as a rest day, but a regular day that can eventually be a rest day by agreement between the worker and his employer. And overtime pay, it also spoke to the fact that every person employed during any period in excess of 40 hours in any week is to be paid overtime. So it modified how overtime is now paid. So primarily the Flexi Work Week Act focused on the hours of work and payments due, but it really did not respond to some of what is happening now in terms of COVID. And we recognize, I recall years ago, this act is good because I recall years ago, if you ran out of a bread, you would not get a bread in a grocery store because they're all closed. You had to go to a gas station, or as we say in Jamaica, you eat tough crackers until the grocery store is open. Now the FLEXI Work Act allowed us to do a little bit more than that, but it did not premeditate some of the kinds of work relations that we're now having. And basically, it has allowed us to move into this new COVID-19 changing world of work. And I call it Changing World of Work 2020. And I continue to emphasize that the world went to sleep overnight and the future of work was thrust upon us by COVID-19. The pandemic, among other things, has signaled a new way of doing business. I call it an economic renaissance, a shift in demand and supply of labor, and the general way of working. So COVID-19 has thrust us forward 15 to 20 years in how several persons envisage the world of work. So the reality, my friends, is the change is here. We can't turn back. And we will have to be reactive in our response and yet be proactive in planning for the various waves and other shocks that we are to expect. But on a lighter note, COVID-19 is not all doom and gloom. As Caribbean people, we build resilience by seeking the opportunities amid the crisis. And here we are with COVID-19. So through COVID-19, we have seen that many organizations are using staggered shifts, compressed work weeks, staff rotation, job sharing, telecommuting, that's the work from home, reduced hours, and part-time work. Those were all mentioned in the 2010 study. And we're seeing 3 new strategies: office hoteling. And for those who are wondering, what is office hoteling? It is pretty much where different work teams use office space at different times to complete their mission critical work. And it's like a hotel. You stay there for a specific time, you come out and you go, and another group comes in. And they've also been using employee swap. So if I need certain skill sets and I'm a government department, I can borrow that skill set from another department for a week or 2 instead of hiring that skill set. And also the rapid response teams, if I have some work that needs to be done immediately, I need a quick team, I can call interns, etc., just to beef up my regular team and get the work done. So those are some flexible arrangements. Now, when we look at flexi work, what's the implications for productivity? And we look at the implications for productivity as what are some of the concerns that we're having with what we call the original contract. And what we're recognizing is that, and I'm sure the trade union will speak somewhat about this, that we're seeing growing temporary nature of jobs, that job security is being removed in some instances, and it is being referred to as gig work. There's also the inescapable use of short-term contracts and the implications for the original contract of employment. Persons are changing the contract unilaterally, and that should not be. And we recognize also that there are new methods of employee performance monitoring, which is not a bad thing, but we need to get it right. We are seeing also the absence of clear guidelines for recording punctuality. How do you record punctuality when there is no attendance book? You know, things like that. Attendance, how do you record absence during remote work? Things like that. And also, there's a likelihood of flexi workers contributing to the large pool of workers in the informal sector. And we certainly do not want to go there. So the Ministry of Labor and Social Security has recognized that several employers and workers are embarking on creative ways of surviving amid the challenges presented by the pandemic. The ministry encourages flexible work arrangements in a manner that is in keeping with the various labor legislation. In Jamaica, we say, it's not what you do, but how you do it. The Ministry of Labor and Social Security has publicly encouraged social dialogue and consensus between employers and workers. Despite the encouragement, the ministry has received numerous reports where the workers' original contracts are changed arbitrarily and unilaterally by the employer, resulting in the workers receiving only a fraction of their normal wages whilst working normal hours. In some cases, working hours are cut drastically and are also resulting in workers losing fringe benefits, including health plans. This is not considered to be flexible work arrangement, but this is in fact a breach of labor legislation. It is therefore important that as employers face hardship due to the downturn in business, there is a genuine consultation in arriving at flexible work arrangements that are mutually beneficial to the worker and the organization. As we work together to rebuild our economy, rebuild Jamaica, we urge employers and workers to be proactive and to use the services of the Labor Department in each parish. Our staff are available and ready to provide labor law advice and assist in resolving workplace conflict and industrial disputes arising from the demands of the changing world of work. Again, we encourage productivity and therefore support flexible work arrangements that are conducted in full observance of labor legislation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gillian. That was an extremely powerful presentation. A lot of information there shared with us, you know, from that study that was done by the ministry in 2010, still, you know, having some powerful points for us to think about. And you also mentioned some new ways of flexible work arrangements, office hoteling, which I think a number of persons are already, you know, reducing their lease agreements and making use of that, where they have schedules and share an office space and equipment as well, which has the benefit of also reducing operational costs for the organization. Employee swapping and rapid response teams. You know, these are definitely things that we can think about as we look for solutions. You also mentioned, Gillian, that the need, and I want to just highlight that point before we go into our next segment, in that we have to be very creative in how we come up with these flexible work arrangements, and that the consultation is going to be important so that it is win-win for everybody. It can be, and we have to find what is best based on the situation or the environment or the organization that we are in. So thank you again, Gillian. And we will be having question and answers at the end of the question and answer segment at the end of all of the presentations. So thank you again, Gillian. And at this time, we will now welcome Mrs. Helene Davis-White, right, who will flow right into the workers' perspective, what they have been seeing as at the Confederation of Trade Unions as this unfolds a little bit more. So Helene, we welcome you and look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you, Tamar. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Just to say that the Jamaica Confederation of Trade Unions is indeed happy that we are focusing on this discussion this morning, because certainly COVID-19 and its impacts has led us to, again, and I use the word again because, as Gillian pointed out, this whole thing about flexible work arrangements is something that we have been looking at for a very long time in the Jamaican context, but it has certainly brought home to us the need for us to, as partners in the Jamaican economy, focus on flexible work arrangements because of what COVID has done to employment has done to how we organize our workplaces, etc. So we think it's a very timely discussion. As would have been said before, the workplace has been changing over time. And because of the changing workplace that we have been seeing for the last decade or more, the nature of work has also been changing. And so it means that we have had to, as unions, along with our members, we have had to be looking at means of being able to ensure that we continue to have workers employed, but recognize that the situation has changed. So most of us would have grown up in an environment where we were really accustomed to what came out of the Industrial Revolution, which is the kind of factory floor kind of organization of labor. And we have recognized that that is not delivering the way we would want it to in the context of how we do business worldwide. And the whole issue of globalization has meant that we have had to, look closely at what we are doing, how we are doing our business in order to remain competitive. And so this issue of flexible work arrangements was something that as trade unions, we certainly bought into. It may be gradual, it may have been gradual, but certainly by the time the act was passed, the trade unions were on board. Just to point out that there's a point that Gillian raised that is absolutely important for us, that when we are looking at changing work arrangements, the whole issue of consultation is going to be key. And that is something that I think the law spoke. So it was not something that employers could just get up and change how work is organized without some consultation with workers. And we have found that where you have the consultations, you have fewer problems for sure, because you would have had those discussions and the pros and cons would have been gone into. And most times workers recognize the benefits very often outweigh the disadvantages. Just zeroing in on what has been happening in the era of COVID-19. We found that many workplaces would have had the concern of trying to continue delivering service while at the same time not exposing whether workers, clients, or the producers, exposing them to undue risk in terms of their of them contracting the COVID-19 virus. And so this whole issue of flexible work arrangements came back on the table. So we had to look at how work is organized and how in fact the services are delivered and how we produce the goods that we are producing. What we have found is that in many instances, through discussions with employees and their unions, we have been able to have implemented schemes which saw in many instances staggering of the workday, so that instead of having all your employees come in at one time, you stagger them and some come at one time and then they are relieved by another set that come at another time. What we have also found is that what has worked for some persons, for some employers, is this whole business of telecommuting, working from home. And of course, that is going to be dependent on what it is that the business is involved in doing and how they actually deliver services to clients. And so through consultations, again, we have been able to put in place arrangements where workers actually are able to work from home. Of course, what this calls for is some investment in technology, because work from home is really about telecommuting and how it is that you are able to carry out your job from home as if you were at work. And of course, the access to technology is going to be very important. And so as a result, a lot of companies were recognizing some of the difficulties we are facing in Jamaica right now with our internet providers. And that is something that certainly we will have to look at if we are going the route of telecommuting, because sometimes that is what actually militates against an employer wanting to go that route, because the system in Jamaica sometimes presents problems. But it also requires investment in technology and research and development as well. Because what we have to be able to look at, we are in a particular industry, we are doing business a particular way. If it is that we are going to be considering other ways of doing business, we need to have some investment in research and development. So I think our companies, our businesses will have to be looking at spending more on research and development and also technology if we are going to be going the route of telecommuting. That's going to be absolutely important. A lot of companies are questioning whether in fact their workers have become more productive as a result of them implementing flexible work arrangements. And I think the jury is out on that, because when we actually began implementing these changes, I don't think many of us actually put in place measurement systems that would allow us to be able to say categorically whether or not we have been experiencing increased or reduced productivity as a result. What I can tell you as a trade unionist is that many workers who have been involved in telecommuting are indicating that they save in terms of energy and time traveling to and from work. I mean, the workforce for Kingston and St. Andrew largely lives in St. Catherine, Portmore, and as far as Old Harbor. And many workers to get to work have to, at 8:30, have to be up from 4 o'clock in the morning to ensure that they get to work on time. Just think of what it does to that worker. By the time the worker gets to work, they would have almost completed a day's work on public transportation. So if you take that into account, you should be able to ensure that you have more productive workers, because they would not be out there trying in the hustle and bustle trying to get to and from work. One of the things that we have also recognized is that from several places that have implemented these flexible work arrangements, you have reduced absenteeism. In that, you have fewer workers asking to for in the public sector, we call it departmental leave to be able to transact certain kinds of businesses, etc., or sick leave. We have found that we have had reduced sick leave. In one place where I represent workers in the public sector, through consultations, we were able to agree to the workers working 24 hours on and 3 days off. And many of us didn't think it was possible that workers would agree to that kind of work arrangement, but in that particular workplace, it was possible. And we actually saw a marked decrease in sick leave, requests for sick leave. Workers report that they now have more time to spend with their families, so they find that it is more conducive to their work-life balance as well. And so you have these workers going into work because they are more comfortable with what is happening with their children at home, that they're going to work more in a more productive frame of mind, because their mind is not on what is happening at home, because they would have spent more time at home with children. One of the things, though, that I would caution, because this is one thing that we had to agree to, exactly when does this 24 hours start? Because some of these workers were in receipt of certain allowances for traveling at certain times of the day. And so we had to agree in order to ensure that workers did not lose any benefits as a result. We had to agree to the workday actually now starting on the night shift and not on the day shift. So they ended up losing nothing. Of course, that would have meant that it would have been more palatable to the workers in that sector. So I would say, all in all, as far as flexible work arrangements go, we think this is something that we need to focus on more, because the law that was passed tended to focus more on working hours and payment for overtime. Yeah, it did not actually go into the full gamut of all the modalities in terms of flexible work arrangements. What we have been finding out, particularly for younger workers, they are more amenable to these new forms of work arrangements. And so we are saying that what needs to be done now is that our employers have to come on board. A lot of our supervisors have to come out of this mode that they believe that only when the worker is sitting at a desk and they can see the worker sitting at the desk can that worker be productive. Many times that worker is far more productive when you're not seeing them at a desk, because they are operating in a context of freedom. And we have to recognize, especially with younger workers, we are dealing with workers who have come up in a totally different paradigm. And so we have to recognize that what will motivate the workers of today is not the same thing that would have motivated workers of certainly my era, because I mean, for persons in my era, we were almost totally wedded to a 5-day, 40-hour work week. And we have had to totally change how we think to be able to, you know, wrap our heads around this whole thing about flexible work arrangements. There are some workers who don't mind working in a gig economy because they feel that that serves their interests better. All we have to do as trade union is to try and ensure that, you know, the safeguards are put in place so that the whole business of exhaustion, overwork, and so on does not come into play. But at the end of the day, we believe that certainly in this era of COVID and even post-COVID, or I would say in this era of having to live with COVID, that we have to focus more on how we organize our workspaces. Flexible work arrangements include how we organize our work, how we organize our payment systems, because we have to talk about flexible payment systems as well. And so these are the things that I think we should now be focusing on. And for us in the trade union movement, it is a period that we have that has allowed us to be able to look more deeply into how we conduct our own business as trade unions and how we are able to educate our workers as to the various types of arrangements and how we can seek to get in a kind of symbiotic way the best for workers while at the same time getting the best for the workplace, because certainly we recognize that without a properly functioning, profitable business, our workers won't continue to be employed. So that's it for me for now.
Thank you, Helene. Wow, that was indeed, you know, some very, very useful insights that you shared with us. You know, so rich with information. You mentioned throughout your presentation a lot about the whole matter of collaboration, consultation, symbiosis, and the benefits of doing that, and you know how it has yielded success based on your experience locally in terms of, you know, going through this phase that we're in. You also mentioned that, and I think it was in our discussion, you know, in preparation for today, that, you know, a lot of us really didn't get a trial period, right, as it relates to flexible work, and we were kind of thrown in, right? And we will be it will be with us for a while. And having that gone through that now, we can build on what we have learned and experienced so that we can get better at it and put in place the necessary systems to ensure that that happens. We will have a lot more to discuss with you, Helene, as we go on into the Q&A section, because there are some questions that persons would want to kind of deep dive into, and we will leave that for later in the discussion. So thank you so much for sharing that with us. And for those who are just joining us, you are tuned into the discussion on flexible work arrangements and its impact on productivity. And we are about at the halfway mark in terms of speaking to our presenters, and we will be unpacking some of the issues and workarounds that we can actually thrive at this time and still remain productive, or even more productive than before. And to continue in our discussion, we'll now move on to, I think, both presenters so far mentioned, including our opening speaker. And that is on the matter of technology and infrastructure. And we have someone, Mr. Rory Banks, who is ready to share with you some of his insights. Rory has over 9 years of experience in information security and IT, right? IT auditing. And he has an MSc in cybersecurity from the EC Council University and a BSc in Computer and Information Technology from our very own University of Technology. He is the Director of IT Security Advisory at Simtai Consulting Limited. And he will be speaking to us a little bit about, the whole issue of security and infrastructure, two topics, two areas that we have found at the Jamaica Productivity Center where persons have been unsure and has held them back from going to a flexible work arrangement. So after listening to Rory, we're sure that you'll be more comfortable, right? And he's ready to share his insights with us. Over to you, Rory.
Thank you, Tamar. I have to say, great presentation so far, very insightful. I know we have been speaking about the benefits, but there are some risks that we still have to take into consideration with flexi work. So flexi work, I'm going to focus more on the remote work aspect or the telecommuting, since the telecommuting has really changed how persons view the workplace or the working environment. Before we even get to the telecommuting though, we have to think about how will the culture be impacted? Because, for example, workplaces are used to their traditional, maybe they start work at 8, they're physically at a workplace, they're interacting with people, having different conversations with persons. But now with telecommuting, that has changed because you're not in constant view of other persons or other personals. Even the processes of organizations has to change and has to be updated to facilitate telecommuting. The tools there are so many tools out there and so many technologies that can be utilized. You may even get confused when you start looking at the tools and the technology. But to select the proper tools, you have to take into consideration that the culture of your organization will not be significantly impacted. And also the type of business that you are running will also drive the tool sets that you're using. So for example, Simtai Consulting, we're an IT consulting firm, and we do security services, IT audits, IT assurance. So we believe in technology. The tool sets that we utilize may not be the same for other organizations. So one of the tools that we have to utilize is for tracking the hours that we spend on projects. So time and attendance is important. How many projects are we working on and how long do you spend on those projects? Traditionally, you may speak about clock in and clock out. However, because we're in the consulting space, we have a minimum working hours per day. So we would say you can do 8 hours per day, but we don't restrict you to that 8 hours being between 8 and 5. If you want, you could work 4 hours now and then 4 hours in the night. And because of this whole COVID situation, and majority of our staff has been working remotely, we have found that they have actually been working even more than the 8 hours, because you're so embedded in the work environment, because you're comfortable at home, you're on meetings, you're doing your work in your space, in at your home, at your leisure. Some persons, they don't even have to put on a suit, they don't have to put on work clothes. So they end up getting embedded in the work. And we have seen that they've been working even more hours. So for us, the productivity has really skyrocketed. We have even have to be implementing different processes in place that if we see persons exceeding X amount of hours per week, we automatically give them a time off or a few hours off. So we would say, all right, last week we saw you working a 60-hour work week. Take this day off, get some rest. How prepared were organizations though for remote work? So if COVID did not happen, would more organizations be switching to telecommuting, or would they be pushed to implement these different remote work from home processes? It's I would say no, because this COVID has really pushed organizations to adapt to technology, to implement more technology, utilizing more tools out there. Some organizations, however, were prepared. So at Simtai Consulting, we were prepared because we started implementing a lot of these tools and technologies before. So yes, you would have VPN where you can access your data remotely before, but in terms of how easily this is accessible, we would have ensured that we have additional security controls in place to ensure that only the authorized persons can access these data. Would have even ensured that all the data has been moved to more secure systems and provide more availability and uptime. Even the speed in which you access these systems is very important, because it will now take a very high toll on your internet connection. So before, persons would have been at the office where you would have a very fast internet connection. But now persons are at their home, their internet connection may not be as robust or as fast as the office. So you would have to ask them, yes, you're working from home, so you need to ensure that you have certain things in place. Strong internet connection, very important. If you can have even a redundant internet connection, so these would ensure that if one service provider goes down, you'd have a next service provider. What we have stressed for our employees is that you can utilize your phone as a hotspot. So we ensure that we provide mobile phones to persons, to staff members, and we also provide them with over 10 gigs of data per month. So if their internet goes down, they can use their hotspot from their mobile devices, connect to their laptops, and actually continue working. So in terms of ensuring that persons are working faster, more securely, more safe, you can even be a little more flexible and utilize what's called BYOD, so bring your own device. So some organizations may prevent staff members from utilizing their own personal devices for connecting to the data. However, it all depends on how you structure your environment and your data. So for example, now, let's say you're utilizing a virtual desktop where staff members, they don't have to have a provisioned laptop from the organization to connect to this data or to this environment. But all they need is internet access, and they can utilize any machine, their personal machine, their tablets. But to connect to that environment, they would need certain credentials. They would need to know the IP addresses or the remote host that they're connecting to. And they would also need to implement a different level of authentication, which is called two-factor authentication. So this can be something that you have, something that you know. It can also be a randomly generated token. So this enforces a stronger level of security to connect into the environment. So I know organizations were faced with issuing laptops to some to some persons that traditionally they would not require a laptop to work remotely. So the BYOD has kind of alleviated some of that concerns. However, there are some drawbacks with it, because now you're saying you can utilize your personal device to connect to company data. How can you ensure that that data is safe and secure? Or where is the information when someone connects to that data? Because traditionally organizations, even before the cloud, you would have your data residing on-premise, physically on a server at the office. Not even VPN access you may get to connect to that data, because the organizations have the mindset that, hey, if the data is locally here, it's more secure. If we have to come physically to the office to connect to it, it's more secure. But with telecommuting, you are now opening up the space where you're accepting remote connections into your data. It could reside here in Jamaica, it could reside overseas, it could be in the cloud somewhere, but you have to enforce that you have different controls in place that you're utilizing to monitor this access and to control the data that's being accessed. So you could practice least privilege. Don't just grant access to the data because they work here. Ensure that persons or staff members only have access to data that they need. So you shouldn't give them access to every single thing. So practice least privilege access. Then DLP is our next technology or tool that will be heavily utilized. So DLP stands for data loss protection or prevention. So this ensures that specific data sets has controls in place. So you could look at data privacy. So someone should not have access to this level of data. Even if they do have access to it, how do you ensure that they can't copy this data and put it on their personal device? Or even if they're moving the data, are you alerted? Are you advised that someone has access to this data? Or even if you send the data to someone externally, to one of your customer, what are they doing with the data? With DLP, you can put restrictions in place so they can't screenshot the data, they can't print the data, they can't forward the data to anyone else. And this is tied into email, USB drive. So there are different means and ways that you can pull the data from your machine or from your environment. You would also like to implement tools and technologies like mobile device management tools to ensure that you can, so if you're issuing out a laptop, you need to ensure that it's hardened. So antivirus, anti-malware protections, because you don't want a case where your device gets compromised through a virus. But the mobile device management tool will ensure that you can locate the device where it is. You can enforce strong security policies. So you can enforce stuff like password policies, ensure that you have to use a complex password, ensure that the device is encrypted. So even if the device is stolen or lost, you can either locate the device, or if you can't locate the device, then you would ensure that the data on the device is encrypted, so no unauthorized persons would be able to gain access to it. In facilitating the remote work, so yes, you have time and attendance, but you would also need to ensure that productivity is captured and is increased. So there's a lot of productivity tools out there that organizations are gravitating to. Even we currently, we're using Zoom at the moment to facilitate this conference, this presentation. And more organizations are using Zoom, WebEx, GoToMeeting, Microsoft Teams, and the list goes on and on and on. So there are so many different tools out there that you can use to collaborate, to ensure that you can communicate with your staff members, you can have open discussion, you can see persons. And yes, these tools are good, but what you need to ensure is that it's implemented in a secure manner also. So utilizing these tools, yes, but once you ensure that they're secure, then you should feel a little more comfortable to ensure that all persons within the organizations are familiar with the tool. They have training, so they know how to utilize these tools. They know how to identify that, hey, something is not right. So let's say we're hosting a meeting here and it should only be a private meeting between persons within the organization, and then you see someone else hopping onto this meeting. Are you aware that someone else outside of your organization has just joined the meeting? What steps should you do, or what are the processes to protect? So should you stop the meeting immediately? Should you close the meeting? Should you report it to the IT personnel? So yes, even though you're working remotely, you still have to consider securing this infrastructure, securing the ways that you connect and the ways that you operate. So we can't reduce security by facilitating usability. So it has to be a very good balance right here, especially with the telecommuting and the project management. So some additional items that we had to implement at Simtai is we have daily stand-up or check-in meetings with each of the team members. So we have different teams here, and we ensure that each day we have a meeting where we discuss the different tasks, the different activities that needs to be done. And this is tracked in a tool also. So we assign the different tasks, we put the due dates there. Everybody comes together throughout the day, they would work on these tasks. And this is how you would track to see how productive are the different staff members. So are they accomplishing the tasks that they set out to do within the defined time? Or are they lapsing or not completing the task? So that's a good way to track it. If you have projects that are due on a specific date or a specific time, how do you monitor to ensure that staff members are working to meet these times? And the productivity tools will assist with that, and the project management tools. So some good examples are Asana, Microsoft Planner, Trello. These allows you to set up projects within this platform, allow you to add the different staff members. They would get notifications if a task is assigned to them. They would get alerted if a task is almost due, if it's overdue, if you have assigned any comments to it. So these tools really help you how to be more productive, help you to track to see what is occurring, and it really will increase the productivity and the whole collaboration. So yes, organizations have to change how they view the technology, how they operate, but you still have to ensure that security is configured and considered within everything that you do, because cyber attacks have increased and the use of technology now has also increased. So since COVID, more and more organizations have been utilizing remote tools, remote work from home tools and technology. So for example, Microsoft Teams, Google Suite, these tools have increased exponentially in terms of the use. So we have to ensure that it is secure. And yes, we're working remotely, but there are some tips that you should always consider when you're working remotely. So strong passwords is a must. If you can, ensure that there's a password manager that you use or a password vault to record your password. So don't write down your password. So yes, you may say, yes, I'm working remotely. No one is beside me. No one is here. It is my home. You may write down your password on a paper. That is not secure, that is not safe, because what if you have visitors? What if you have someone coming over to your house, then they see that password? Or what if you even throw away that password and it gets into the garbage bin? Someone may be looking in the garbage bin. So it's always good to not write down your password. So the use of password managers have increased also, because this provides a secure way of sharing the passwords, recording the passwords, ensuring that you're using strong passwords. So this ties into the whole remote work from home. I also spoke about two-factor authentication. So this just adds an additional layer. So yes, you have your password, but also the two-factor authentication would add a next layer for you to authenticate or for you to grant access to users remotely. VPN access. So the VPN access is also critical, because you're working remotely and you need to ensure that wherever you store the data or wherever IT has the data, that you can access it and that you have legitimate access. So if you can access a data remotely, that means that an attacker can also try to access that data remotely. So you need to ensure that if you're using a VPN, so that's a virtual private network, to gain access to the data, that this is configured securely, safely, it is encrypted, it is restricted to only the authorized persons, and you can add more restrictions in place. So even if you VPN into the network, you restrict how much data that one person can access. And you also need to ensure that you have logs and monitoring in place to ensure that the data that's being captured or that is being accessed is recorded. So all your devices needs to be up to date. So your laptops, your mobile phones, your firewalls, your storage mediums, all of these needs to be continuously up to date. Because traditionally, persons would have connected to their devices and IT would be responsible for ensuring that it's up to date. So you have your laptop, and when you come into the office, you may get updates. No, you may not come into the office space for months or for weeks. So this update still needs to occur. So over VPN, you may push these updates remotely, or you may enforce policies that once you have internet connection, your machines or your devices can be continuously updated or up to date. You need to ensure that your Wi-Fi network also is secure. So your home Wi-Fi network. So change all the defaults for it, all the default passwords. So your password may even be written down on your device. So majority of these corporations that utilizes the wireless router devices, the password is under it. So if you take up the router at home, you look underneath it, you may see the password, or it may be written in a book. And these also have default credentials. So ensure that you harden these Wi-Fi networks. You practice secure video conferencing also. So I typically advise clients and our staff members to use a headset. So you don't want to have conversations or a video conference call and just speaking out everything, and persons can hear both lines of communication. So if they're just hearing you speak, then that is not so bad. But if they're hearing a full conversation, then they will know the question that you're answering to. And what is also important is that we need to ensure that staff members are trained and there's a strategy in place. So yes, COVID kind of affected how IT would have planned to roll out these remote work facilities, but we still need to ensure that a strategy is in place to ensure that we are fully protected and that we're operating securely in terms of how we facilitate the remote work from home. In essence, I find it very interesting and excited to facilitate the remote work from home. We as an organization at Simtai, we will continue to practice this because we have seen the improvements and the increase in productivity. And yes, there has been some impact in other areas. So again, culture has shifted a little bit, but there are benefits for it. So after post-COVID, there may be a hybrid approach that more organizations will adapt. So it may not be a full telecommuting where you work continuously remotely, but maybe you come into the office a few days and then you work remotely. But infrastructure has to be robust, it has to be secure, and depending on the size of your organization, there may also had to be upgrades done to the devices, to the firewall. So the firewall may have only been able to facilitate 10 users, but now you have 50 users working remotely. You may also have to purchase additional licenses, more tool sets, faster computers, or you can even go to the cloud and spin up more servers faster. So these strategies has to be planned out, and it is best to ensure that they are implemented securely. Thank you.
Thank you, Rory. We heard you. I think we feel like we just got our masters in data security. And I'm sure based on the responses I'm seeing so far, that persons are benefiting from the discussion. And I hope you have your pen and paper and you were taking notes. And if you did not, we will be having the recording available to you after this session has ended. So you can listen again and share it and get all the points that Rory just mentioned. We thank you, Rory. And I think we have some questions for you in the Q&A. You can check your WhatsApp and you will see some of the questions that persons have been asking so far. As we will move along, we do have another another presentation for you, and this time it will be from Kadian Morris, who is at Sagicor Bank Jamaica Limited as the HR Relationship Manager. Kadian, we want to welcome her. She is has a master's degree in human resource development from the University of the West Indies and has over 16 years of experience in the field. Now, Sagicor has been one of those companies who has taken made some very bold moves as it relates to working, flexible working. They have different kinds of arrangements that they have implemented. They have been through it, gone through it. They will be here today to share with us what their lessons learned and how we can also implement some of the initiatives that they have undertaken. So Kadian, over to you.
All right, so thank you so much, Tamar. Excellent presentation so far, so many takeaways from the presenters who went earlier. Now, let me first start by, thanking you for having invited me to this panel, and just want to say a special big up to my Sagicor family who is also tuned in as we speak. Now, first, I'd like to highlight that globally, so much is happening and so much has happened and so much will continue to happen as it relates to coronavirus, COVID-19. Essentially, we would have been told that for us to be in office, it's the way to go, but COVID would have changed that mindset completely. So the workplace is no longer a place. Essentially work is anywhere where you can get the job done effectively and efficiently. So light, nimble, and agile is the future of work. Now, thankfully for us at Sagicor, as it relates to flexible work and remote work and work from home, this is something that we would have had in place pre-COVID. So we would have launched our work from home policy back in June 2019. And, it has been a success. It has been going very well. And it was a welcome addition to the pool of benefits that we offer to our team members. So the buzzword right now is the new normal, or as some put it, the new abnormal. So I'd just like to share some of the things that for us, Sagicor, that we would have done in light of COVID. Now, we would have ramped up our communication channel, right? So we're now over communicating. We would have created a space on our intranet, more of a communication blog. We call it the COVID response communication channel. And this is where we share updates, regarding COVID, updates from the Ministry of Health. So, timely and authentic updates are shared on this space, and our team members have easy access to go on and see all these updates. We remind our team about sanitizing, wearing of the masks, and so on. We would have also updated our business continuity and our business resumption plan. We had a robust online training session in place prior, and with COVID coming on now, we would have ramped up our training sessions. We would have also automated and digitized some of our processes, and also to share as it relates to remote work and telecommuting, we would have had approximately 40 to 50% of our workforce working from home. So this is all in aid of keeping the safety and well-being of our team members at the forefront of our minds. Now, I'd like to share with you some of the things that we would have done to assist our team with managing this flexi work, this remote work, and this work from home. So as I said earlier, we would have ramped up our training session. So we had done some training programs. which was the secrets of working from home. And, we would have looked at some of the struggles as it relates to remote working, managing your time, accountability. We would have provided our teams with tips. We would have said to persons, when you're working from home, you're remote working, you need to treat it the same way as if you're coming into office. So, don't just lay in the bed in your pajamas and say you're working on your laptop, dress up, show up, put together your structure and so on, and, make it just as if you were in office so that you can be productive. We would have also had other training programs like managing change, strategies for effectively leading remote team. And this one in particular was geared towards our people leaders, because of course our people leaders are out there in the field helping the team to manage this new normal. So those are some of the things that we would have done as a company. Now, as it relates to productivity, Tamar, I know you're interested in how we were able to manage productivity. So normally for us at Sagicor, we have our performance appraisal system, and we have our assessments mid-year and we have it at year-end. The success factor assessment tool is what we use at Sagicor to assess performance. Now, in light of COVID, what our people leaders would have been doing is, instead of waiting until half year or year-end to do the assessment, we would have broken it down into smaller tiers. So we had our people leaders meeting with our teams on a weekly basis, on a monthly basis, breaking down those targets so that at the end of the day, we can all be productive and we can all, exceed our targets. And just to share that some of the feedback from the team members are that with this remote work, this work from home, they're now better able to focus. They have less distractions. The phone is ringing, team members walking in, clients walking in, and that sort of thing. So, the distraction would have been on a lesser level. So they were able to focus more, and so they would have been more productive. And some of the benefits of this flexi and remote work are, it provided a positive influence on work-life balance. So we find that our team members were now in a better position to manage their family, manage their children, and balance that with work. So the 9 to 5 was no longer, the structure or the way to go. So some persons would have indicated that, hey, perhaps in the daytime is when they spend time with their kids. Homeschooling, that's the new normal now. So a lot of parents would have been going through that. So they would have used the daytime to spend the time with their kids, to do the homeschooling, and then perhaps they use the nighttime to get the job done. So, we would have gotten some good feedbacks regarding that. We also would have been made aware of, there's a higher job satisfaction as it relates to flexi and remote work. We find that team members, they now feel as though their work life it's not scheduled to this 9 to 5 structure. So, they have more time to balance work and family. So they feel as if they're more satisfied as it relates to the job. Also, as I think Helene had mentioned earlier, with this flexi and remote work, we would have seen, a lower employee turnover, lower absenteeism, and predominantly greater organizational commitment. I'm not sure if you would have seen our president and CEO, Mr. Zaka, would have shared in the public that based on our financials for half year, we would have, in terms of our profits, we would have gained over $4 billion in profits. So it just goes to show that our team has been productive. We have been providing exceptional client service to our clients, and as a result, we're reaping the benefits in the profits. I'd also like to mention that, no system is perfect. So even with the flexi and the remote work, we would have also seen some challenges. So our team would have shared, the technology and the connectivity hiccups. Sometimes the internet connection is not the best. So, they would have had some challenges regarding that. Unfortunately, our frontline and our client-facing team members would not have been able to benefit from remote work. For obvious reasons, they would have had to be in office to assist clients when they come in. Some persons would have also mentioned, the distractions, the neighbor dog barking, that sort of thing. So there were distractions as well as it relates to remote working. As a company, we would have also assisted our team members in terms of the training programs that we would have put on, the mental health. May was Mental Health Awareness Month, and we would have brought on psychologist Dr. Windell Abel, to just share and help our team members to, cope in this new normal. So many persons initially weren't dealing with it well, the anxiety, the uncertainty. So we brought in Dr. Abel, and he was able to assist in terms of providing some nuggets, to help the team to go through this process. So those are some of the things that we would have done. As it relates to innovation, so for Sagicor Bank, we would have taken the opportunity to launch our virtual onboarding system. So this is where we're looking at onboarding our clients virtually. And on the Sagicor Life side, we would have launched our eLife online platform, and that allows clients to purchase life insurance online. So those are some of the things that we would have done prior to COVID, and we want to ramp up the innovation as we go along. So pretty much that's where we are as a company as it relates to flexible working, working from home, and remote working.
Thank you so much for that, Katie. And again, excellent work you are doing there at Sagicor, and excellent examples shared with us. And I am sure I'm seeing some of the questions here coming through for you. And we will get back to you on that one. Thank you so much for being here and for sharing with us this morning. All right, so moving right along, because the time is going, and I want to get to the questions so that persons, we can get those answered by the panelists. We will move right along to our next presenter, who is none other than our very own research analyst here at the Jamaica Productivity Center, Ms. Brittany Johnson, who will be just quickly sharing some preliminary findings with everyone based on a study that we are conducting at the Jamaica Productivity Center. Brittany, over to you.
Thank you, Tamar. Okay, so Jamaica Productivity Center embarked on conducting a study on the impact of COVID-19 on business across Jamaica. And so we developed a survey, and so far we have gotten about over 50 responses so far. We're still in the data collection phase. So I'm just gonna show you now,
Brittany,
some of the results. Yes.
Full screen, please. Go ahead.
Yes, the results that we would have received so far. Now, the main objectives of this survey are to record and collate the experiences and the measures taken, as well as the outcome of these actions by the organizations. And from this now, we would be able to guide and assist organizations as to the best approach coming out of this pandemic that will enable us all to grow and continue to contribute to our economy positively. Now, our first question asked about the sectors. So which sector are you a part of? And we found that 36% of our respondents were from the public sector / the government, 58% from private, and 6% other. We had 3 of our respondents falling under the food industry, 10 under the manufacturing, none from mining so far, 1 from wholesale and retail trade, 2 from tourism, 6 from financial and insurance services, 4 from construction and real estate, and 27 would fall in the other category. This can look into agro-processing, automotive areas, and persons would have listed their other industries that they would have fallen under. Now, we found that 36% of our respondents so far fall under the large organization, so they have more than 250 employees, 33% medium organizations, 14% small organizations, 13% micro organizations, and 4% other. We found that most of our respondents so far fall or are located in the Kingston and St. Andrew region. 3 of our respondents from St. Catherine, 1 from Clarendon, 4 from Manchester, 1 from St. James, and 1 from Westmoreland. Now, we asked a very important question on how, here is where we start to see the effects of the pandemic so far on how organizations have had to operate. So we found that 79% of these organizations have fortunately not had to reduce their staff, while 21% have had to reduce their staff complement. And by how many? 67% said, between 1 and 10 members. 17% is 31 to 40 members. 16% between 11 and 20 members. The more than 40 and the 21 to 30, in that range, no one has had to, reduce their staff by that many. We look also on the revenue and sales and how that has been impacted by COVID-19, and we found that 6% of our respondents, they let us know that their revenue or sales has increased by 6%. 24% said that they remain the same, and 70% said that their revenue or sales had decreased. And we look at the impact of this. We're looking at, the impact being 53%, looking at more than 20%, whether that is being increased or decreasing. 20%, that's between 5 and 10%, that's the impact. 12% letting us know that it's less than 5% impact. 8% between 16 and 20% impact. And 7% is between the 11 and 15% impact. Now, we also asked them if they had implemented adjustments to their working arrangements. And what we've been hearing so far is that a lot of companies have had to do that. Sagicor is a main one. And we asked and we found that 94% of these organizations have implemented adjustments, while 6% have not. We asked them to also select all that had applied to them in terms of the measures themselves that were implemented. So we found for completely working from home, 18 responses. 26 organizations looked at staggered shifts, 31 reduction in hours in office, 22 flexible work sites, 23 flexi time, 11 compressed work week, 7 other. How effective have these measures been? 46% said that these measures have been somewhat effective. 43% says that they have been very effective. 7% said somewhat ineffective, and 4% saying very ineffective. Now, with these changes, we have had to look at the factors that would inhibit the transition to these flexible work arrangements. And after getting our responses so far, we found that, you know, for some, it was not applicable. So 9% of our responses showed that there were no factors that were inhibiting them, so that was not applicable to them. 7% looked at cost as a factor. 3% looked at social distancing as a factor. 21% looked at mindset as a factor. 1% looked at the unbalanced workload that would arise. Another 1% looked at the generational gap. And 6% looked at the unreadiness of leadership. Another 6% looked at compensation adjustments that would have to be taken into consideration. 4% thought that the buying of staff would be difficult. Another 4% had to look at work-life balance, and 37%. Now, if possible, would these organizations keep these measures in effect? And 82% said yes, they would. Another 18% said they would not. And what are the measures that they would keep in effect? 39% looked at the reduction of hours in office. 26% selected the staggered shifts. 18% selected working completely from home, and 17% looked at other examples. And that is those are the results that we have so far. Thank you. Thank you so much. We can use these, you know, we can always use these results, these preliminary results to sort of guide how we continue our discussion today. And by the end of this, you can let us know if you'd like to take our survey so we can continue getting these results, you know, these responses. You can let us know in the comment section your email address, and we will definitely send the link out to you before the end of this program. So thank you.
Thank you, Brittany. Thank you very much. And this has brought us to the end of all the presentations that we have for you this morning. And for those listening in, you are tuned in to the discussion or the conversation as it relates to FLEXI work arrangements and the impact on productivity. So you have heard from all our presenters on the tech side, on the workers side, from the government perspective. You have seen some analysis and some surveys that has been done. And now we are going to answer some of your questions. The questions are flowing in, ladies and gentlemen. And I want to make the best use of the time that we have left with you. And the first question goes to Gillian, and it speaks to the initiatives of the Ministry of Labor and Social Security, Gillian. And they want to know, the person asked the question as to the kinds of initiatives that are the type of flexi work arrangements that we have implemented at the Ministry of Labor and Social Security, and what has the impact been?
Okay, thank you very much, Tamar, and thanks to our participant for that question. The Ministry of Labor and Social Security, like all the organizations, have had to look at what can we do to embrace this flexible work arrangement. And we have done many, many things. We have had staggered and still have staggered shifts. And we recognize that even persons using the staggered shifts have used what we call ride share. Those who would have commuted by public transportation are now doing a ride share with their own colleagues. We have done telecommuting like we're doing now, because I'm thousands of miles away from Jamaica and we are at work. We have tried the rotation of staff, especially during the COVID lockdown in the parish of St. Catherine. We had to do it in order to survive. We also in some departments have had the rapid response teams. For instance, in industrial relations, we are currently, as we speak, taking on interns to help us with some of our customer service because of COVID. We have many persons seeking our services and we're taking on additional capacity temporarily to deal with some of that. And the list goes on. We've been doing telemeetings just like this, webinars and developing policies to work safely in office and also as we do our field work for inspections and so. So there's a myriad of things. I could speak for a very long time on that. And it's been very, very successful and we will be measuring them in a more pointed manner.
Thank you, Jillian, for that response. And I think that you have answered it quite adequately. And I am seeing a number of questions coming in, and possibly you can stay online and start to answer that question as it relates to flexible work arrangements and our education and our school system, how schools can benefit and how applicable is flexi work arrangement to schools. I have a number of questions, varying types, but that's the essence, from all of the participants that have asked. So could you speak to that?
Yes, flexible work arrangements can work in every single sector. Flexi work requires us to think outside of the box, to be creative and innovative in how we work. The world of work is changing. And certainly in the education sector, the conversation is, do we send children back to school, in-person school, or are we going to be having a mix of online school and in-person school? Which means that it reduces that commute. There's a staggering of attendance as well, where in some schools they're considering some, the older or the higher grade children going to school as the time required in terms of their class time rather than for all day school. We have actually seen where the use of technology is increasing. Not all children will be able to learn online, and each educational institution has to look at what is the mix that works for them. But I also have thought about, why is it we're not having Saturday and Sunday schools by choice? Why does it have to be Monday to Friday? Flexi work week has changed, work Monday to Friday, and Saturday and Sunday are work days. So I don't know, it might not go down well with many persons, but it is a by choice kind of suggestion. And we can look at a lot of other initiatives. For instance, I mentioned the rapid response teams. How are we using the teacher trainees as interns to help with that workload? Because yes, we're going to have smaller class sizes because of physical distancing. We need to look at all the resources that are available to us. I do know that the Ministry of Education is doing a lot of different things, and globally, ministries of education are doing many things. So we need to learn from each other and to see how things work, look at best practices, and so as we look at flexible work arrangements. So yes, flexible work arrangement is for the education sector as well, universities to preschools.
Thank you, Jillian. Helene, you wanted to say anything on this question on the education and schools?
Yes, the issue is of concern, particularly in this period here where the cases of COVID seems to be on the increase. And there's concern among both parents and teachers as to how we can get back to a physical experience in the school space. We believe that it has to be a mixture of both. But the problem we have had is some of what we have identified before. Because remember that we did have schools being conducted virtually from April coming up to August. And what has been the concern is the accessibility of most of Jamaicans to a good internet service. Some persons don't have devices, and so that creates a problem. But I think wherever it is possible, it should happen. And I know in a particular prep school with which I'm associated, they almost never missed a beat because nearly all the children were able to join in and have almost the same experience. I think they were using the Zoom platform, and they had almost the same experience as they would have had in a physical space. I think the children were the ones who were most affected because they wanted to be able to have the physical experience with their peers. And so that, I think, will tell us that we need to be able to have some sessions in terms of the mental, the ability of children, because you're recognizing that school is supposed to be a socializing agent, and without that one-on-one contact, you can have some kind of disconnect there. But we believe that it can happen. The major problem is access of both teachers and students to the technology. And if we can get over that, I think it can be done. A mix of both in-person education and education virtually can actually take place.
Thank you so much for your response, Helene. And I have another question for you before you go, and that is, what are the unions doing to help their members to adapt to the change in work structure for an acceptance of FLEXI? And this is coming from Facebook, I think. Right.
Okay, well, we started the process some years ago when we were actually looking at the whole issue of the flexible work arrangements and the changes to the law that came about between 2010, 2014, when we had real discussions that were ongoing at the time. One of the major things that we did was to include in our training program for our delegates a session that dealt with globalization and its impacts on competitiveness. And in that context, we were, based on what was happening across the world, we were able to use those examples to be able to say to our members, these are the things that we are likely to be facing. And so we now need to be thinking along the lines of innovation in terms of being able to deal with the challenges that we're going to confront us arising from globalization. So in that context, we looked at flexible work arrangements. And I think it is because we were doing that work why we did not have any major fallout when the flexible work arrangements law was actually passed. Because prior to that, most workers in Jamaica were really invested in this 5-day, 40-hour week. And because it came with changes to how they were going to be compensated, it could have created severe problems in the labor market, but it didn't, because we were able to prepare delegates and officers for what was likely to happen in terms of how workers were going to be compensated. And so, but what we recognize is that coming out of this period of COVID-19, that we will now have to develop a program that is going to be looking at flexible work arrangements in a more fulsome manner, so that we as negotiators and our delegates at the workplace will have the benefit of understanding and recognizing the full gamut of modalities in terms of flexible work arrangements. So those are things that we can in fact discuss when we are looking at what is happening in the workplace and our ability to be able to lessen the impact on workers if we are able to use these modalities. So that is something that we are actively doing now, trying to amend our program to look at the full gamut of flexible work arrangements.
Thank you, Helene. And you did mention in your presentation how quickly as a group you all pivoted to the needs that were impending within your membership. So that's excellent work, and continue with the good work. The other question we have here is for Kadian. And the question is, since Sagicor has implemented FLEXI work arrangements, what has been the most important takeaway from this initiative?
All right, so thanks for that question, Tamar. So I think one of the biggest takeaways that we would have gotten from FLEXI work from home is just the positive influence that, it has had on work-life balance. So, we would have all been accustomed to the 9-to-5 hustle and bustle. The invention of remote work, work from home, FLEXI work has freed up that space in terms of allowing persons to be better able to manage their time with their family, manage their time with their children, and to balance that with work. Also want to share that it just goes to show that as a company, we Sagicor, we care about our team members, and that is why we were so happy to offer this benefit to the team, remote work from home. And as it relates to productivity, we would have recently completed our mid-year performance appraisal, and I'm happy to share that approximately 75% of our team members would have satisfactorily performed well on their performance appraisal. So it just goes to show that even though our team members are doing on remote work, they're working from home, productivity has not fallen off any at all. So the biggest takeaway is just the positive influence that remote work, FLEXI work from home has had on our workforce. And if I may, Tamar, I'd just like to add that, there's no doubt that the workplace is undergoing a multifold transformation. Organizations are realizing that a new way of working is possible. And for us as HR business partners, we're exploring newer ways and we're embracing the change as it relates to managing our teams and managing our talents. So, the new normal is really here to stay. It's not going anywhere. And, as companies, we really have to arm ourselves with more than just masks and sanitizers in order to stay ahead of the curve.
Just to continue on that point, you raise a very important point in terms of managing the teams. How has the leadership or management style, how did that have to change with flexible work arrangements, if any at all? Please share with us.
Okay, so as I had indicated earlier, the FLEXI work, remote work is something that we had in place pre-COVID, so it wasn't new to us. However, with the robust online training sessions that we would have implemented, as well as the fact that our CEO would have, had these routine webinars, check-ins with the team. So we felt as if it was a collaborative effort. We didn't feel that the team members were out there on their own and leadership was over there. It was a collaborative effort. We ensured that we had the routine check-ins. We made took opportunity of webinars and so on. So, resilient leadership and, is really the heart, of a strong organization. And that's what Sagicor is about.
Thank you for that. Thank you very much for your response, Kadian. And I see I have a few minutes. I have a question for Rory. Very quickly, boy, it looked like we needed a follow-up to this. I'm seeing questions rolling in like crazy. Rory, your question, remote access to, what is it? Oh, what would you say are the most important IT infrastructure considerations for organizations who are transitioning to a FLEXI work setup?
Great question, Tamar. All right, so this all depends on how the company or the organization wants to set up FLEXI work. So for example, are they going to store their data on premise or are they planning to move to the cloud? So if they're going to store their data on premise, then the major item will be internet connectivity and VPN. So how do you get access to that data if you're working remotely? Also, laptops would be very important, or mobile devices to connect to the infrastructure. If it's in the cloud, it's a little more easier to facilitate the access because the VPN is not a requirement to connect to data in the cloud, but they do have certain types of data that you may require a virtual private network to connect to that data. So for example, if you're going to use Microsoft and you're connecting to their data that's stored in OneDrive or on Microsoft Teams or SharePoint, then you would use your username and password, connect to your Office 365 account, and then gain access to it. Yes, you can implement additional security controls like two-factor authentication. So in that instance, then internet connection or connectivity would always be important and critical because you are going to use more bandwidth, internet bandwidth, to connect to the data, to download the data, because it's now in the cloud. So you would have to remotely connect to that environment or to that server to get the data. And remember, a good practice is not to store your data necessarily locally on your machine, or if you are, ensure there's controls in place for backup purposes and also to protect the data that resides on your machine. Because you have to ensure that you know where the data resides, who has access to it, and where it is moved. And we can add so many more things to consider when moving to FLEXI work.
Thank you so much, Rory, for your, yes, you're hearing me now?
Yes, we're hearing you now.
Yes, thank you so much for your response. And I want to thank all our listeners. This morning, I mean, the response has been overwhelming. The comments, I'm seeing some of the comments. It's 2 minutes to the hour. But just to wrap up, I think it was a very robust discussion, a discussion that we need to continue. And I see one of the comments here in terms of this requires a shift in our mindset and our culture that we need to really embrace as the way going forward. This pandemic situation has kind of catapulted us into a place where we need to be, especially as we are in the fourth industrial revolution, and it requires for us to be very agile and flexible and very responsive to the environment that is rapidly changing. One person mentioned that we are running a marathon at a sprint pace, right? So we have to embrace these changes, and you all have helped us to really have a better understanding today. All of the persons joining in on social media, Facebook, Instagram, those listening on Power 106, we want to thank you for tuning in. And those who are on our Zoom platform, we had up to about 90 persons on the platform. Please note that there will be a delayed broadcast on PCB a little later. You can check for that. You can also follow our social media sites for the link to the recording. So please stay tuned and we will continue the dialogue. Our next scheduled session will be in October, and we will be sharing pretty soon the topic, which again is based on the feedback from you, which is most important to you at this time. And you can also view the first one we did earlier this year in June on our social media pages as well. So again, thank you for you all for tuning in, and please continue to have a good day and walk safely, walk good. Thank you.
Once you replace negative thoughts